Hi, Kim Raynor here from All About Spirits Life After Cancer, and I want to welcome you to episode 53 of Life After Cancer. And I'm doing today's show a little different than I've done them in the past. Instead of doing a live video, I'm actually doing a recorded video and I will upload it to Facebook. And the reason for that is I've gotten some comments from people who said that the quality of the video was a little bit hard for them to hear, and sometimes there were interruptions and stuff. So I thought I'd try it this way. So, episode 53. Today's episode is called 10 Feelings Cancer Survivors Have a Hard Time Talking About. And today's show is inspired by my attendance at the Making Strides Against Breast Cancer events in both Appleton and Green Bay this weekend. And you know, the range of emotions that were in that room, it was absolutely palpable. And there were some people that were really pumped up, and there were some people that were excited to be there and thrilled to be taking the walk for people on their behalf and on their own behalf. And then there were also other people who, they didn't look as healthy. They were going through treatment and they were walking as they were going through treatment. And there were some people who had kind of that blank look on their face that says, oh, I am recently diagnosed, or there's something going on with my health and I'm really concerned about that. So, and you know, those looks weren't just on the people who were the cancer survivors. They were on the people who were walking with them or for them and supporting them. So that's what today's show is dedicated to. And, there's some things that survivors talk about, and they're pretty common for them to talk about. One of them is the personal strength that we get as we walk through our journey. Another thing that survivors talk about is how we deepen our relationships with people as we're going through the process of our cancer treatment. And, another thing that we talk about sometimes is how we look forward to life returning back to normal when we're finished with treatment. And those are the things that, that survivors like to talk about and people like to hear about. But there's this other side of things that we have a harder time talking about, that we don't like to talk about. And a lot of it has to do with the idea that for many of us, cancer is the most emotional time that we experience in our lives. And, we're not surprised by that when we're in the midst of our cancer treatment. But after the treatment is over, we kind of expect life to go back to normal, and that doesn't happen for a lot of us. And then we get shocked, or we're embarrassed, or, we're ashamed that we're feeling these feelings that we don't want to talk about and that other people are uncomfortable with us talking about. So, I'm doing this project, and the American Cancer Society invited me to be at their events because of the project I'm doing called 1000 Cancer Survivor Stories, where I'm sharing stories, giving people a safe place to share their stories, both the survivor and the people who are helping the survivor, their caregivers, the people who walk alongside us. And because I've created this platform for people to share really honestly and heartfelt, I get to hear lots of stories. And in as much as we hear people talking about the excitement and the relief that it's over, and, an appreciation for life that they didn't maybe have before, and a deeper sense of gratitude, I also get to hear people talking about the other stuff, the fear of the unknown, the disappointment with life after treatment is over, the feelings of being uncomfortable in our own skin, the unanswered or the unanswerable questions that we have, the frustration, the anger, the depression that we go through, sometimes the fear of no longer getting treatment and what's going to happen when our doctors stop seeing us, and the financial challenges that we go through, and having to depend on other people, and the conflict of emotions between us and other people. Other people are really excited about treatment being done, and we're not feeling that. We are feeling fearful by that. So that's really what I'm going to talk about today, is those uncomfortable things that we bump into. So the first thing that I mentioned was the fear of the unknown. And what I can tell you about that is we don't get to see around corners and there's a good reason for that. For those of us who have, prognosis and who have, this is the survival rate for your kind of cancer, looking around that corner is a scary thing. So one of the things that was really helpful for me in that process, especially because my prognosis was so bad, was I didn't try looking around corners. I really paid attention to where I was, and I tried to view whatever was coming up as if it was going to be an adventure. This is the next part of my life. This is the next part of the adventure, the next part of what I have going on. And I really tried to approach it that way. And that was helpful for me. And sometimes I needed help getting out of the emotions I was in to actually be able to do that. The next thing that I mentioned was being disappointed with life. And, that disappointment has to do with my sense of expectations. When I expect things to be a certain way and it doesn't happen that way, that's where it leads to my disappointment. And it's my expectations around me and what I expect, and around other people, what I expect them to be doing or how I expect them to be behaving. So finding a way to lower my expectations and just accepting things as they are, just allowing things to be as they are, was really, really helpful for me in that process. The next thing on my list is the feeling of being uncomfortable in my own skin. And what I mean by that is when I was with other people, I wanted to be alone. And when I was alone, I wanted to be with other people. And when I was at work, I felt like I wanted to be at home. And when I was at home, I felt like I wanted to be any place but at home. So what I learned from that is it didn't seem to matter where I was or what I was doing. I was just going to be uncomfortable in my own skin. And finding ways to say, okay, this is where I am right now. And I'm just going to focus on the task at hand, or I'm going to focus on the people at hand, and I'm going to be the best version of me that I can be while I'm here and present. And that was helpful for me. The next thing that I had on my list was unanswered and unanswerable questions. And yep, there are some questions that are unanswerable, and there are questions that were left unanswered. And that has to do with that not being able to see around corners. It also sometimes has to do with expectations. So I think that paying attention to the questions that I'm asking was really helpful. Avoiding answering the question why, because why for me is I want to prove you wrong, or I want to find somebody who can be accountable, or somebody who I can assign responsibility to. And that was not terribly helpful. So when I find myself needing to ask questions, asking open-ended questions, paying attention to questions that are really going to be thought-provoking and they're going to make me search in my soul a little bit, that was helpful for me because I could get to the meat of what it was that I was trying to figure out or trying to solve or trying to answer. And just accepting the fact that, yeah, you know what, there are some questions that just can't be answered, and I need to find a way to be okay with that. So the next thing that was on my list had to do with frustration and expectations and the idea that I just really need to learn to take things as they're coming. I cannot push the river and expect it to flow in a different direction. I can't make things happen the way that I sometimes want to. So learning to take things as they are and learning to accept things as they are. And that has to do with being able to identify, what are the things I can change? What are the things that I can't change? How do I tell the difference between those things? And then what do I do with that? I stop spending energy on things that I can't change and I just allow it to be what it is. So the next thing that was on my list had to do with fear of treatment ending. And man, that is a real fear. When we stop seeing the doctor for that first week, if we've been on a weekly regimen, that first week is terrifying. We've been in that routine for a fairly long time. And not having them available at our resource is not helpful. So the things that I that were helpful for me in that process was really paying attention to my body. I mean, I know my body from the inside. Other people know my body from the outside looking in. So if there was something that was happening for me that seemed unusual, I called my medical team. I told them, this is going on and I'm not sure how to handle this. I don't know what to do with this, or I'm scared about this. And they were helpful. They answered my questions and they took my calls, and, they checked things out if they needed to be checked out. So that was one thing that was really helpful for me. Another thing that was helpful was to make sure that I made my follow-up appointments. I can't tell you the number of people that I talk to who get out a year, 2 years, 3 years, and they stop going for their checkups. And I don't know, I just made sure that I make sure that I go to my appointments. I make sure that if I'm due for my mammogram or I'm due for my CAT scan, I make sure that I show up for them. When it's time for my labs to be drawn, I'd have them draw my labs. I also make sure that I'm taking care of my body in between that time. I do a regular exercise regimen. I eat healthy. I try to avoid sugar. I get enough sleep. And getting enough sleep is a huge thing. And, those things all help me make sure that I am staying healthy. And yeah, at some point I needed to step away from my medical team. I wasn't going to be in active treatment forever. And that whole idea of treatment's over, what now, can be really scary. So that's a whole conversation in itself. Let's see, the next thing that I had was financial problems. And I can tell you that financial problems will not go away if you ignore them, like most things in life. And when I ended my surgery, after my surgery and my treatment and I was done with everything, I was about $300,000 in debt by the time it was all said and done. And I can tell you that there were lifestyle changes that needed to be made. I was underinsured, and I relocated, and I moved to a different house because it wasn't sustainable to stay where I was living. But I also made contact with my medical providers all the way through, so they knew what was going on for me. They knew where I was financially, and it wasn't a surprise. And I can tell you, I didn't have to file for bankruptcy. I still owe a lot of money to some people. But I didn't have to file bankruptcy. They were so willing to work with me. And the key to it was I started really early in the process having honest conversations with them. And my medical providers, they actually helped me get some scholarships from the drug manufacturers to help me with some of my medications when I couldn't afford to pay for them. So being honest about what's going on is really helpful financially. And one of the other things, I had to reallocate funds. I mean, my 401k doesn't exist anymore, and my life savings doesn't look like it was. And I had this attitude for a long time. Oh, I had to give up everything for this, and I had to pay them all this money. And shifting my attitude from I had to give up everything to I chose to invest everything I worked my whole life for to keep me on the planet. That was really a big shift for me, and that helped a lot in that process. The next thing that I had on my list was depending on other people. So the reality is we don't do life alone. And the sooner I learn that, the better off I am. And accepting the fact that other people were there to help me, and then I could be grateful and I could try to pay that forward to other people. It's just the way of life, and the sooner I accept that, the better off I am. And then the last one, which may have been the hardest for me, was the whole idea of conflicting feelings. That I am feeling, I'm feeling scared and nervous about this. And my medical team and my family and the people that care about me are all excited about me being done, and they're in celebration mode. And the best thing that I could do with that was to be honest with them to the best of my ability, and then to not expect them to understand. I can't expecting somebody who hasn't gone through my experience, especially a traumatic experience like this, expecting them to understand what it feels like is unreasonable for me. It's kind of like me expecting what it would be like to anatomically be a man. I mean, I'm not capable of understanding that because I don't have that experience. And it's like that with surviving cancer too. If you haven't had the experience, you don't necessarily get to understand. So, not expecting non-survivors to understand. And that means, finding your support network, finding the people who do get it. Come and join the All About Spirit community. There are people here who get it. We are going through the same kind of things that you're going through. So if you are feeling any of those emotions that I talked about, right? The fear of the unknown, the disappointment with life, feeling uncomfortable in your skin, feeling like you have unanswered or unanswerable questions, feeling frustrated or angry or depressed, fear because you're not getting treated anymore for your active cancer, if you're bumping into financial challenges, if you're uncomfortable depending on others and you're dealing with those conflicts in feelings, know that you're not alone. Know that there's lots of us out here who have gone through the same kind of thing, and we're willing and able to help you. That is the end of what I have for today's episode, and I just want to share one last thing. I have a project. The American Cancer Society invited me to participate in Making Strides Against Breast Cancer because of my project, and it is 1,000 survivor cancer stories, and I'm creating a safe place for people to share their stories, to talk about what's really going on for them. And if you have a story that you'd like to share, whether you are the person who has survived cancer or you've walked alongside of someone as they walked through their journey, you have a story that needs to be told and somebody needs to hear it. Your story can be told as a written story. It could be told in a video like this. It could be done as an interview. Your story might be captured in a piece of artwork that you created while you were going through your treatment. Whatever method your story is saved as, I would love to give you a platform to share it so you can heal and so you can help be of service to other people as well. Because we heal by sharing our stories and we grow by sharing. So my invitation to you is to share your story if you feel like it. And if this video was helpful to you, if today's show was helpful to you, I hope that you will like it and share it. And I hope that you tell other people about the show. And I would love to hear your comments on how you feel about the videos being done this way as opposed to being done live. So thanks for being here today. And until we actually have a chance to talk, I hope that life treats you well. Take care.